So hello and welcome to the video. In this video, what we'll be looking at is simple interest, compound interest, and we will also be looking at some of the questions from these two topics. Now, before I move on to simple interest and compound interest, let me give you a background of this, that we would require a little bit of understanding of the successive percentage change. And of course, when simple interest and compound interest, a lot of these things have to be measured in terms of percentage, and hence the basic knowledge of percentages as a chapter should be pretty clear before we move on to this, right? So I presume in this video that you are aware about successive percentage change as a logic and how does that really works. Okay, so let's move on and let's understand simple interest first of all. Now, even before we move on to the concept of simple interest, we need to understand what do we mean by interest. So suppose I come to you and I say that, can you lend me 20,000 rupees back at the end of 3 years? In all probability, you are not very interested in this argument, because you will say, if I have to get back only 20,000 rupees, then I might as well keep it with me or use it for my purpose rather than giving it to you, because it is not giving me any benefits, right? That particular benefit that you are wanting to is called as interest. So if I say that, please give me 20,000 rupees and I'll give you 30,000 rupees at the end of 3 years, that to a certain extent makes some kind of sense to us, right? So what we are trying to convey over here is that if we look at the final amount that you are getting, that final amount includes your principal plus interest. So the example that I had taken, wherein I was taking 20,000 rupees from you, so that's the principal value. And when I'm giving you the final value as 30,000 rupees, what am I doing? I'm adding an interest of 10,000 rupees. That is a benefit that you are talking about. So that interest is what we will be dealing with. And there are different ways in which you calculate this interest. And that is why you term them as simple interest and compound interest. So going forward, we will try to understand the logic of this. Let's move on and let's try and understand how is simple interest different from compound interest. So interest, when interest is calculated on the same principal value for every year, that's the case simple interest. Going forward, we will see that when it comes to compound interest, the interest will be calculated on a different principal value year. So let's take an example and try and understand simple interest at the moment. Suppose the principal value or the amount invested in a business, whatever you wish to call this, is 1,000 rupees and the rate of interest is 10% per annum. Time period is 3 years. Let's try and do interest in this particular case. Suppose I wish to calculate the interest for the first year, interest for first year alone. Now, if I wish to calculate the interest for first year, that has to be 10% on the, because a 10% on 1,000 rupees, and that's going to be what? That's going to be equals to 100 rupees. So that 100 rupees will be the interest for the first year. Now, to calculate the second, can suggest, as the concept suggests for simple interest, that the interest for the principal value for the interest calculation for every year remains the same. That means my for the second year also is going to remain the same, which is 1,000 rupees. This is the principal value that we are referring to, which we are saying that it is same for every year. So you are charging a 10% on 1,000, that is again 100. If I have to calculate it for the third year again, then I'm going to do the same thing, which is 10% of 1,000, which will be equals to 100. So if you look at these 3 years put together, the interest value generated is 300. Let us understand as to what can we do, ways in which you can write this 300. So for example, if I say that this 300 is something, I can write it as 3 into 100, because 100 has been added 3 times, right? And what was this 100? This 100 effectively was nothing but 10% of 1,000. So can I then simply say that this is 10% of 1,000, which now brings me to an important formula that we all have probably mugged up since our childhood days. 3 represents what? The time period. 10 represents the rate of interest, which is R, and but now I wish to bring this to your notice, that this formula gives me the interest part of the equation. Which equation am I talking about? I'm talking about the same old equation, which is amount to principal plus interest. So this formula of simple interest will give me the interest part. If at all the question is asking me the amount part of the equation, I will have to add principal to this interest to be able to get down amount, right? Keep that thing on your mind very, very clearly, because a lot of time when asked, people use this formula and give the answer as simple interest, which is, to my mind, unnecessarily losing the marks on the paper. Okay, so we have to be very careful about this. There's another very important thing that I wish to bring to your notice, which is how do we calculate effective rate of interest? Effective interest. I am termed as my value of interest as a percentage of principal value. I can effectively say that in case of simple interest, I can numerically add the to get the effective rate of interest, which is 30%. In fact, if you look at this formula, this 3 into 10 will also give you a 30% of 1000. So effective rate of interest is the numerical sum of rate of interest for each of these years when it comes to simple interest. Remember, it will not be the case when it comes to compound interest. And let's look at what do we mean by compound interest and how do we generate the formula for compound interest. Now, as we have discussed earlier, that in compound interest, the value for every year's interest calculation will be different. So let's take the same example, the principal value being 1000, rate 10% and time period being 3. Calculate the interest for first year in this case. Now, if I calculate the interest for first year, it should ideally be what? It should be that I have taken 1000 from you at the interest for the first year alone. I want to calculate the interest for second year. This is where your compound interest differs from simple interest. Now, please pay attention to this. The concept of compound interest says that rupees over here was due at the end of the first year itself, never returned, right? So for the second year, I'm not just going to charge you an interest on the principal value, charge you an interest on the interest of first year as well, right? So 10% on a different principal now. And how do I get that different principal? I will have to add the principal and the interest. So that is 1100. So if I add this, then this is going to be what? 110. So interest for second year alone will be what? 110. But now remember this thing, interest till the end of 2 years, which will be the sum of these two values, is going to be 210. Keep that on your mind. Interest till the end of 2 years will be 210, but interest for the second year alone will be 110. Now let's have a look at this. That interest for the third year will be what? Interest for third year should be a 10% on what all values. This 1000 was there with the person who has taken the loan for that, but for the third year. So you must charge an interest on this 1000 for sure. Then you must charge an interest on this 100 because this was also there with him for the third year. And you must charge an interest on this 110 as well, which was there with the person for the third year as well. So this will be 110. So effectively you are charging a 10% on 1210, which is then going to be what? 121 as the interest for the third year alone. Remember once again, interest till the end of 3 years will be 331, right? Now let us understand what has exactly happened. For the first year, you had charged me an interest on just the 1000 rupees. But then for the first year, your money grew by 10%. That means for the second year, my principal was 1100, right? So your money value, which was 1000 rupees for the first year, has now become 1110. That's an increase of 10% over the previous year's value. So amount at the end of the first year will be nothing but a 10% increase on the principal value, which is what we were getting, 1100. And that turned out to be the principal for the second year. Again, what am I going to charge? I'm going to charge a 10% on this 1100 and then add it back to this 1100 to generate the principal value for third year. That means that your value again increased by 10%. So this particular value again increased by 10%. So the value became 1.1 whole square of this into 1000, right? Then again for the third year, the amount increased by 10% of itself. So the third year, the amount that person need to pay back should be 1.1 whole cube into 1000. Now watch this very carefully. Amount is turning out to be 1000 into 1.1 whole cube of this. Now let's go further. Amount will be equals to what? 1000 into 1 plus 10 by 100. This 1.1 is something that I have written it as 10 by 100 and written a cube of this, right? If you go further, the final amount is equals to principal into 1000 was what? Principal. 10 was what? The rate of interest. 1 plus r by 100 to the power of n. So amount is equals to principal into 1 plus r by 100 to the power of n is the formula that you are getting. This 1.1 whole cube is nothing but a percentage increase factor. So for example, if I say that the rate of interest for first year is 10%, rate of interest for second year is 20, and rate of interest for the third year is 30%, then I will simply grow my value by that percentage for a particular year. For example, the amount at the end of the first year will be 1000 into 1.1. At the end of 2 years, it will be what? This money should then increase by 20% for the second year. And then again for the third year, this money should increase by 30%. So this will be the amount at the end of 3 years. This is something that we need to understand. That's the first thing that I wanted to convey as to from where do we get that formula of amount is equals to P into 1 plus R by 100 to the power of n. Please understand this thing. If we end up mugging this formula, then we will never be able to do this problem because we don't know as to how this happens. From where do we get this 1.1 whole cube? This is something very, very important and significant that we understand this. Second thing that now I wish to bring to your notice is that when I take this 1000 and multiply it by 1.1, that's an increase of 10%. Now again, a new value has been increased by 20%. Then again, a new value has been increased by what? A 30%. This is effectively nothing but a successive percentage change of 10%, 20%, and 30% for 3 years. Right? Now, let me get some more space over there and then talk about as to how can we apply our successive percentage change formula and can still get down to the answer very, very easily. So 10% and 20% combined for 2 years will be 10 plus 20 plus 10 into 20 divided by 100. If you calculate this, this is going to be a 32% change, right? So if you combine 10% and 20%, that's a 32% change. Combine it again by a 30 with another 30%. So 30 plus 32 plus 30 into 32 divided by 100. So if we look at this, we will say it is 62 and 30 into 32 is going to be what? 960. So this is 9.6. So if you now combine this, this is going to be 71.6% that you are talking about. So that will be the effective rate of interest for 3 years. If the first year's interest was 10%, second was 20, and the third was 30. So you can apply your successive percentage change to get down to the effective rate of interest. In the previous case, in case of simple interest, the effective rate of interest was numerical sum. In the second case, where it is compound interest, the effective rate of interest is nothing but successive percentage change. And that is something which is very important. In your school days, we have not really learned this and we have not applied this. If at all we have learned it, we have not applied it. We have survived with the help of this formula. Now, if we really wish to survive this paper and do exceptionally well on this, we will have to have a better understanding of the concept. And this is what leads to that kind of an understanding, right? There's one more thing before we move on to the question, which is the types of compounding. Now, when I say types of compounding, what do we mean by this? The process of adding your interest for the first year to the principal of the first year to generate the principal for the second year is called as compounding. Now, this compounding can be done at various intervals. That means after 1 year, when you compound your interest with principal to generate the next terms principal, that is called as annual compounding. But when you calculate the interest for 6 months and now add this principal and interest to generate the principal for the next term, next 6 months, that is called as semi-annual compounding, right? So there can be different types of compounding, and in that case we will have to change a few things with respect to our formula. Of course, when I'm talking about compounding, I'm only talking about compound interest. In your simple interest, you don't do any such things, right? So now let's take one example and try and understand as to how and what will exactly change in our formulas. Now, the formula that we have referred to is amount is equals to principal into 1 plus r by 100 to the power of n. This is the amount that we have referred to. Now, principal value invested was 1000 rupees, rate of interest was 10% per annum, and time period was 3 years. That's the thing that we are talking about. Now, let's go ahead and look at the types of compounding. If I look at the types of compounding, the first thing that we have looked at is we have looked at the annual compounding. We've looked at the annual compounding. In that case, my principal value was 1000, my rate of interest was 10%, and my time period or my value of n for that matter was equals to 3. Now let us understand as to how will things change when you have a different types of compounding. So let's say suppose you have semi-annual type of compounding, semi-annual type of compounding. Now, if I'm looking at semi-annual type of compounding, for the first 6 months, my principal value will still remain the same, which is 1000. So in the formula, I'm going to use the same principal value, which is 1000. But the rate of interest is 10 percentage points per annum. Now you are looking at 10 percentage points per annum. That means for 6 months, if I look at it, then in 1 year, I should get total of 10%. So in first 6 months, I'm going to charge you an interest at 5 percentage points. And in the second 6 months, I'm going to charge you an interest at 5 percentage points. So in your formula, the value of R that you will be now using will be 10 by 2, which is 5. Now value of N. N is not equals to the number of years. N is equals to the number of terms. N is nothing but the number of terms. Now, if it is a semi-annual compounding, in 1 year, you will have 2 terms, first 6 months and the next 6 months, right? So in 3 years, how many terms will we have? We will then have 6 terms. So the value of N in that case must be 6. Let's go further. Let's say, suppose I'm doing a quarterly compounding. If I'm doing a quarterly compounding, then after every quarter, I'm clubbing my interest with principal to generate the principal for the following quarter. So my principal value will be what? 1000 for the first quarter, of course. And then my rate of interest should be 10 percentage points in 4 quarters. That means in 1 quarter, it should be what? 10 by 4, which is 2.5. Now, in 1 year, you will have 4 terms. That means in 3 years, you will have how many terms? You will have 12 terms. Clear with this? Let's go a little further. And let's say if it is a monthly compounding, then what are the values that I'm going to use? My principal value will still remain the same, which is 1000. My rate of interest must become 10 by 12. And my value of N in 1 year is 12 times compounding. So in 3 years, it is going to be how many times compounding? It's going to be 36 times compounding. So the value of N that I will use over here, in that case, must be 36. Go further and say that it is after every 4 months. Now, a lot of time people get confused over here and presume this as a quarterly compounding. A quarter is of 3 months. So it is not a quarterly compounding that you need to pay attention to. Now your principal value will be what? 1000. Your rate of interest should be what? If I look at the bunch of 4 months, in 1 year, you will have it 3 times. So what will you do? You will divide 10 into 3 equal parts and you will do 10 by 3. Same way, in 1 year, you will do 3 times compounding. So in 3 years, we will do what? We will do 9 times compounding, right? So now if they ask you any kind of compounding, you must be prepared with what you need to do, what changes you need to do on your formulas and the values. Okay. Let's now move on and we look at the questions for the day. And as usual, the drill remains the same, that what we are going to do is we will look at questions. I'm going to give you a certain amount of time and then we will discuss those questions. So let's move on and let's look at the first question for the day. I mean, it's time for all of you to solve this. Try this out. Last 20 seconds. Last 5. Let's have a look at this particular question. It says what? Ram invests a certain amount and gains simple interest at 10% per annum for 2 years. Sham divides the same amount in the ratio A is to B is to C and then invests these amounts to gain simple interest at a rate of 20% per annum for 2 years. The difference between the amounts received by the two is 2,000 rupees. This is the data given to us. We have been asked 2 questions. We've been asked what is the ratio A is to B is to C? What is the value of that? Now, if you look at this, Ram is investing a certain amount at 10% simple interest for 2 years. That means we can numerically add 10% for 2 years. That's going to be 20% interest. So Ram is going to generate what? Ram is going to generate 20% interest. Sham divides the same amount in the ratio A is to B is to C. So whatever may be the ratio over here, let's say suppose I take 1:2:3 or 2:3:4. On each of these amount, I'm going to generate 20% for 2 years. 20% per annum for 2 years. That means 40%. Let me say that this was the amount A, this was the amount B, and this was the amount C. So what am I going to get? I'm going to get 40% of A plus 40% on the second amount as well, which is B, and on the third amount as well, which is 40% of C, correct? For 2 years. This will be the amount that Sham will generate. The difference between the two amounts is 2,000 rupees. Now let us evaluate this statement a little further. I can take 40% common, 40% of A plus B plus C, correct? And Sham was investing the same amount as that of Ram. So whatever was the amount that was invested by Ram is invested by Sham. So can I then say that on the same amount, Sham is getting 40% interest, wherein Ram was getting 20% interest? That means it is on the same amount, and hence I can take the difference of these percentages because the base of the percentages is same. Base of 40% is same as base of 20%. So what are we then going to say? We will say that the difference amount will be 20% on the total amount invested by either Ram or Sham, whatever that may be. So let me take that value as X. So 20% of X, that was the difference value, and that difference value must be equals to 2,000. So if this is going to be 2,000, then what are we going to say? This will get cancelled out. It will be 100 and X will be equals to 10,000. That means 10,000 was the amount invested by either Ram or Sham in the business. But what is the question asking you? What is the ratio of A's to B's to C? Now understand this thing. A's to B's to C can be any value for that matter. It doesn't matter. It's still going to remain the same. So the answer to this question over here, what is the ratio of A's to B's to C, has to be cannot be determined. Because it can be anything for that matter. You take 2:3:4, you will get the same answer. If I take 1:2:3, it's going to be the same answer. What is the total amount invested by Ram and Sham put together? Ram and Sham put together would be investing 20,000 rupees. So the answer to these two questions must be cannot be determined, and the second answer should be 20,000. I hope we all are clear. Let's move on and look at the second question for the day. Try this out. Take your time, a minute and a half to solve this. Last 30 seconds. Last 10. Let's have a look at this. Now, this is the concept of installments. What is the question saying? Ram took a loan of 64,100 compounded at 10% per annum and wants to return it in 3 equal installments in the ratio 1:2:3. So my installments can be X amount for the first installment. It will be 2X amount for the second installment, and it has to be 3X amount for the third installment. Now, what is the amount of the second installment is what the question is talking about. Now, pay attention to this. 6,400. If I wish to settle this amount at the end of the first year itself, then what will I have to return? I will have to return 1.1 into 64,100. If I return this amount, my loan will close. But the point is that I'm not returning the entire amount. I'm only returning X amount, right? Now, for the second year, you cannot charge me an interest on the amount that I have returned to you. So what will happen? The principal for the second year is going to be lower by X. If I would not have given this amount X, my principal would have been 1.1 into 64,100. And then what I would have done, I would have charged a 10% on that. But that is not the case because I've returned the X amount back. So this will be the principal for the second year. This value will then grow by 10%. And now I'm giving, this is the amount at the end of 2 years if I wish to close it. But I want to close it at the end of 3 years and not at the end of 2 years. So second year, at the end of second year, what is that going to happen? I'm going to give you a certain installment, right? Which is the second installment. On that amount, you can't charge me an interest for the third year. So this will then become the principal for the third year. And you will charge me a 10% on this value. If you charge me a 10% on this value, this is the amount that I need to return at the end of 3 years. Now, remember, I need to close the entire loan at the end of 3 years. That means this value that I need to pay must be equal to 3X, or what you can do is you can say, I'm going to subtract 3X and I should not be left with any amount, whatever that may be. So you can simply put this value equals to 3X. You have to solve for the value of X, but remember they are asking you the second installment. So you will have to give them the second installment and not X, but 2X, right? Let's just try and solve this. It will become what? It is going to become 1.331. which is 1.1 into 1.1 into 1.1 into 64,100. Then it's going to be 1.21x because this will become 1.21. And then it is going to be minus of 2 times of 1.1x. That should be the value equals to 3x. Let me just check if I've got it right. 1.21x and then 2 into 1.1x and then 1.331x. Fair. I think I've got it right. Let's move on. So we try to get down to the value of x from this entire equation. 1.331 into 64,100 should be equals to minus of 1.21x and minus of 2.2x is equals to 3x is what we are talking about, right? So let's just add this 1.331 into 1.331. So just give me a second. It's going to be 1.331 into 64,100 should be equals to 3.3x over here, and this will become 3.41x. So if you solve this, this will become 6.41x. So 1.331 into 64,100 should be equals to 6.41x. So what should be the value of x? 1.331 into 64,100 divided by 6.41. Remove this decimal, put 100 over here, 641 over here. So this will be 100. Now, if you solve this, this is 13310 as the value of x. Remember, you need to give the answer as 2x and not x. So if you look at this, this will be 26,620 as the answer for this question. So this should be the second installment. This is the concept of installment. Once an installment is paid, you cannot charge an interest on that particular amount which has been paid back. And that is how your banks generally work. Okay, let's move on and let's look at question number 3. Once again, a minute's time for you to solve this. Take your time. plus 15. Right. So let's have a look at this. It says Jack takes a loan of 1,000 rupees, which accrues interest at a rate of 10% per annum, and invests in another business which generates a profit of 20% per annum. He withdraws the profit every year till he pays off his loan with this accumulated profit. Okay. Now, Jack takes a loan of 10,000 rupees, and there will be a certain amount of money that he has to pay. Suppose he's able to pay this amount after T years. Okay. So what is happening over here? 1,000 rupees, which was the principal value, plus 10% as the interest, as the simple interest on 1,000 rupees for T number of years. This should be the amount that should be paid back. And every year he is withdrawing what? 20% profit from the amount that he has invested, which was 1,000. So 20% of 1,000 that he keeps withdrawing for T number of years, these two values must turn out to be equal because he's paying off the loan from the profits that he's generating, right? So he will keep accumulating, and one day what will happen? The accumulated amount will become equal to the amount that he needs to repay, and that is the day he will pay off his entire loan, right? Now let's just go forward and try and solve this for the value of T. So this should give me the time period. 1,000 plus 100T should be equals to a 200T, should be equals to a 200T. Now go further and you will realize 100T should be equals to 1,000. And what is the time period? Time period is 10 years. Time period is 10 years. Now, if the value of time period is 10 years, then we have solved one part of the question. Now, he then decides to remain in the business for 3 more years. For how many years was he there in the business? So 10 years over here and 3 more years after this. That means the first answer should be 13 years. He should be there in the business for 13 years. What is his net income? Now understand this thing, that after 10 years, whatever loan he has taken, along with the interest, he has paid it back, right? And now he's staying in the business for 3 more years. Now this will be the case of compound interest, right? Why? Because he stays in the business for 3 years. Now no more he's pulling out the profit after every year. So the profit of every year is then getting invested into the business again, and the profit generated for every year is 20%, right? So what will happen? The final amount that he will generate from this business after 3 more years, after this 10 years period, should be his profit value, the entire money he can take home, as he has already paid off his loan, right? So 1,000 rupees at 20% per annum for 3 years. So 20% per annum for 3 years, 20 plus 20 plus 20 into 20. I'm trying to calculate the effective rate of interest for 3 years when it is 20% investment. So this is 44%, and 44% combined with 20% for 1 more year, because there is a total of 3 years time period. So if you solve this, it will become what? 64 plus of 880, so 8.8. So it will become 72.8% as the interest value. Remember, what will be the total amount? The total amount will be principal plus the interest value. So 1,000 plus 72.8% of 1,000. Very easy calculation. So this should not take much time. 1728, or an interest of 72.8 could have been said that the amount is 1.728 of 1,000. Simply, that should be 1728 as the final amount, right? In either case, the answer to this question should be 1728. He will have a net income of 1728 from this entire transaction. Let's move on and let's look at question number 4. Another minute's time to try and solve this. Take 10 seconds more. Another 20 seconds to go. Right. Let's have a look at question number 4. An amount takes 5 years to become 3 times of itself under simple interest. It's a question of simple interest. It is becoming 3 times of itself in 5 years. Now understand this thing. They're not saying that the interest is 3 times of principal. No, they're saying amount is 3 times of principal. So amount is equals to principal plus interest. That should be, amount should be 3 times of principal. So the interest generated is 2 times of principal. Now, if interest generated is 2 times of principal, it's a 200% interest. You should have figured that out directly from here itself. When it says that the amount is becoming 3 times of itself, that means interest will be 2 times of itself, and interest being 2 times of itself, it's a 200% interest. Clear? So if it is a 200% interest in 5 years, and it is a case of simple interest, I can very easily say that 5 years, it's a 200% interest. So in 1 year, it's a unitary maths problem that it is a 40% interest rate, right? So with the first statement itself, you can get down to the interest rate being 40%. And that too, I don't really think you need your pen and paper to do that. Okay. If it was lent at a same rate of interest, but it is compounded semi-annually, then what is the minimum number of years required for it to become double of itself? Double of itself means what? The interest percentage should be at least 100%. Another thing to watch out for is it is semi-annual compounding. That means the interest will not be 40% for one term, but rather it will be 20% for one term, right? So 20%, how many such terms will be required to look at the effective rate of interest being 100%? So 20% for 2 times will be how much? 20 into 20 divided by 100. That's a 44%. That means 2 terms implies what? 6 months and 6 months. That means 1 year, it will generate an interest of 44%. It has still not generated an interest which was desired, which was 100%. So let me take one more 6 months. So 44 plus 20 plus 44 into 20 divided by 100. So what will happen? This will become 64 plus an 8.8. We had done this calculation in the previous problem. So 72.8%. Now it is 72.8% after 3 terms. Remember, 3 terms is not 3 years, it is 1.5 years that we are looking at, right? So after 1.5 years, the amount would have grown by 72.8% of itself, right? Now combine this 72.8% of itself for another 6 months. That is at 20%. So 20 into 7.72.8 divided by 100. This time we are reaching a 92.8% over here, and definitely this amount is more than 10, right? So it is probably somewhere about a 15 odd value, right? So that's the thing that we need to understand, that the moment I go for the 4th term and I complete my 4th term, the amount will become double of itself because it would have given me 100% interest. So it will be a minimum of 2 years will be required, because it cannot happen in 1.5 years, right? So that's the answer for this question, that it will require a minimum of 2 years to double itself. Please ensure that you do not forget to take into account the semi-annual calculation, because a lot of time people make this mistake and then end up with the wrong answer. So be very careful with this. Let's move on and let's look at question number 5. Take a minute and a half's time to try and solve this question. Last 30 to go. Last 10. Right. Let's have a look at question number 5. It says, now this is a question coming from one of the CAT papers. Let's try and understand this. Amal invests 12,000 at 8% interest compounded annually and 10,000 at 6% interest compounded semi-annually. Both investment being for 1 year. Now this 1 year makes my life a lot easier because 8% for 1 year, it will give me a simple interest. It's compounded or not compounded does not really make a difference because, and of course it is given to us compounded annually. So simple interest and compound interest will be same for the first year. So 8% of 12,000 will be the interest that it will generate for Amal, right? So it should be 960 for this particular investment, and 10,000 at 6% interest compounded semi-annually. Now 6% interest compounded semi-annually, that means for one term it should be 3%, and both the investment being for 1 year, that means 3% for 2 terms. 3% for 2 terms would imply what? 3 plus 3 plus 3 into 3 divided by 100. So that's going to be 6 plus of 0.9. So 6.09% will be the effective percentage interest that he will generate on 10,000 rupees for 1 year. Now 6.09% interest on what? On 10,000, right? So that would then turn out to be what? 609 as the interest, right? Now Bimal invests his money 7.5% simple interest for 1 year. Amal and Bimal gets the same amount of interest. So what is the amount of interest that Amal is generating? This is for Amal. So Amal is generating what? 1569 as the interest. And Bimal is investing at 7.5% of the principal value, simple interest for 1 year. So into 1, if at all you wish to do this, and this should be 1569, right? You simply have to solve it for the principal value. Then the amount in rupees invested by Bimal is what? That is what the question was. So if you remove this decimal, it's going to be a 0 in the denominator. So 25 into 3, 25 into 4, 40, 3 5s are 15, 3 2s are 6, 3 3s are 9. So effectively the principal value invested by Bimal was 523 into 40. We just have to do this simple calculation. So 4 3s are 12, 4 2s are 8 and 9, 5 4s are 20. 20920 will be the principal value. 20920 will be the answer for this particular problem. Right? So again, you are looking at a question coming from CAT paper. It was not a very difficult question. Some of us tend to get into a habit of saying that if the question looks lengthy, I'm not going to attempt it. Is not a fair idea. I really want you to give it a 40 seconds read before you decide that you want to leave or attempt that question. Okay, so keep that on your mind. Let's move on and look at the next question. Again, coming from a CAT paper. Take about 1.5 minutes of time to try and solve this. A 30 seconds more. Last 10. Right. Let's try and solve question number 6. It says, again, a question coming from CAT paper. A person invested a total amount of rupees 15 lakhs. A part of this was invested in a fixed deposit at 6% annual interest, right? And the remaining amount was invested in two other deposits in the ratio 2:1, earning an annual interest rate of 4% and 3%. If the total interest 76,000, then the amount invested in the fixed deposit was how much? Okay. Now it is 15 lakh rupees. 15 lakh rupees is divided into two parts. One part is, let's say, suppose A, and the other part then of course is 15 minus of A lakh of a rupee. So A is nothing but the value in terms of lakhs. Okay. Now a part of this was invested at a fixed deposit earnings at 6% per annum. So let me say that this A was invested at 6% per annum, and total value of 76,000 is the interest income. So I'm going to take what? I'm just going to take the interest values over here. So 6% of the amount A is the interest value on this. This second amount was invested in the ratio of 2:3. So 2/3 of 15 minus A was invested at a rate of 4% per annum. So what will be the interest that you will generate over here? 4% of this, right? And the second investment amount was 3% interest, and that amount was 1/3 of 15 minus of A. This will be the total interest that you generate, and that should be equals to 76,000. But remember one thing, if you put this value equal to 76,000, you're not going to get the answer, because 15 is in lakhs, A is in lakhs, you will have to put the value in terms of lakhs. So this should be 0.76. Be very watchful with such errors on the paper. Okay. Let's just try to solve this. Everything has got 100 in the denominator. So I'm going to multiply the entire equation by 100. 6A plus 8 by 3 into 15 minus of A plus 3 will get cancelled out, and 100 will also get cancelled out. So you'll get 15 minus A over here again, and this should be 76. We just have to solve this equation. So we are getting 6A plus 15 minus A into 8 by 3 plus 1, which is going to be 11 by 3. And that value should be equals to 76, right? So now let's just try and solve this entire equation. So it will become 6A plus 3 5s are 15, 55 over here, minus 11 by 3A should be equals to 76. If you try to solve this, 6, 18, 18 minus 11, that's going to be 7 by 3A, should be 76 minus 55, that's going to be 21. So 7 3s are 21. A should be equals to 9. This is in lakhs. Keep that on your mind. What was the question asking you? 76,000. Then if the total invested in the fixed deposit was over here, a part of this was invested at 6% annual interest. That was A as the amount. So the answer to this question should be 9 lakhs. Please understand this thing. Don't put a 76,000, 76,000 over here. You will have to put 0.76, or if you wish to use that 76,000 over here, then 55 zeros, and then A will also come out in terms of that. So that will be 9 with 5 zeros that it will appear, right? So let's move on and let's look at one last question for the day. It's not a difficult one, just a minute's time to try and solve this. Take it. Last 30. Last 10. Right. Let's have question number. The simple interest on 2000 at X percentage for 3 years. Now X percentage for 3 years, simple interest. So X plus X will then become what? 3X as the percentage interest, correct? So 3X as a percentage interest on 2000 is what you are looking at. The simple interest on this for 3 years is same as compound interest on 10,000 for 10% for 2 years. Now 10% for 2 years, it's a compound interest. So 10 plus 10 into 10 divided by 100 will then turn out to be what? 21% interest, right? So 21% interest on 1,000 rupees is what we will be, on 10,000 rupees is what we will be calculating as the compound interest. Remember, they're not talking about amount. So don't use that formula. Amount is equals to P into 1 plus R by 100 to the power of n, because that's amount part of the equation. They are talking about the compound interest. And that is the reason why I told you that successive percentage is going to help you like crazy on compound interest and simple interest. Okay. So this is the interest value, and both the interests should be equal. So we just have to solve this equation and get down to the answer. 3 2s are 6. So 60x should then turn out to be equals to what? 2100. A 0 gets knocked off, and 6 3s are 18 and 6 5s are 30. So the value of x should be 35% is what the answer should be. Was not a very difficult question. Should have been through very, very quickly. Also, please ensure that you use the concept of effective rate of interest. If we can use this concept, your life will become a lot easier on simple interest, compound interest kind of problems, right? So that brings me to the closure of the session, guys. Thank you so much, and hope to see you on the next video. Please ensure that you like and subscribe the channel, and stay tuned for further videos on our 100 Days to CAT series. Thank you.